Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Amelia.
And this is Be More Picard.
And today it's Stardate 78457.8. And we'll be beginning at the very beginning of Star Trek Next Generation with the episode Encounter at Farpoint.
So pour yourself a cup of Earl Grey, let's settle in and engage.
So, to start off with, Matt, could you give us a quick run through this episode?
So, as we have said before, this is not the place for deep dives, so this is just going to be what we need to get through the script. So, in Star Trek Episode 1, Encounter at Farpoint, Picard takes command of the best-looking ship. Now, yes, I grew up with Voyager and Janeway, but that is the best Enterprise right there. DeForest Kelley appears to pass the torch wearing 80s aging makeup, which for me is absolute nightmare fuel. Q appears and attacks with the best-looking grid of low-res space invaders that can be made by a Commodore 64. Q accuses the human race of being savages and barbaric, and quite frankly, I agree with him. No lies were detected there. Picard attempts to not engage with his nonsense, but decides it's best to save the civilian population if he can first. This takes us to the awesome battle bridge, a brilliant idea that I'm sure will be regular and last throughout all the series of this show. Q puts Picard on trial as a representative of humanity, and Picard puts up the defense of the year. Accepting his predicament and remains true to the Starfleet ideals, he solidifies himself as the master negotiator. Picard wins humanity's freedoms for now, but Q assures him it's not over. A wild Will Riker appears, but not in his final beard form power, and is immediately telepathically accosted by his ex right in front of the captain. Picard has Riker perform a seemingly pointless maneuver, but establishes the chain of command and sees how far Riker's capabilities go. The crew reunites and flies off with more adventures ahead.
Beautiful, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, first one. New ship, fresh out of the shop. Not going to want to get a scratch on that thing, are you?
No, you've with great ship comes great responsibility, and that is something that Jean Luc seems to accept from the off. He knows where he is and what his task is ahead of him.
And you do not want to ding that thing driving out the lot.
No. Well, that's why he has other people do it, because then he can just go. Yeah.
So Picard has come from the Stargazer.
Yes, where he had been in command before. There's a lot made of Picard being a pilot, but he is definitely, by this point, already a well-established captain. But even with he knows the weight of his reputation that comes before him, and the weight of the expectation that comes with captaining the Enterprise,
the flagship,
the flagship, and the ship that has been. Is the standard bearer for Starfleet, and he knows that he now has to uphold these ideals and project them forward.
So where he's come into this, he's an established captain and he's got a reputation that comes in before him. So what does that mean? It means that he's got a lot to live up to himself. There's going to be a lot of pressure, not just that he's putting on himself, but he knows is coming externally as well. There are going to be people who he knows from before. There are going to be people who are going to be completely new to him. And he's got to be a completely new person to all of them too, not just the reputation that he comes in with. And it is a lot of pressure to come in with. And with that comes probably that feeling that you have to establish yourself pretty quickly. And a lot of people, the big mistake that they make when they come into positions and roles like this is they'll either want to establish their authority quickly, or they will want to start talking, show what they know, show how good they are in the first instance. And that's actually one of the biggest mistakes that you can make when you're coming into a role like that. So Picard, what example he set to me with doing that was he didn't come in and, throw his weight around. Okay, he did make Riker park a ship manually. However, for the most part, he just sat there and he listened and he was very, very calm. So I wonder what you thought about that, Matt.
So it's definitely good that he comes in and decides to work with the crew and start and work out what their capabilities are first, which is definitely something that I tend to do myself in new jobs. However, I wish that I could be more Picard, and I'm trying to be more Picard with how I handle these things, because I know that I handle them in the wrong way. I am well known in my professional life for you don't really know Matt until you've had a really good argument with him, because that is how I tend to find out what people's capabilities are and find their boundaries and my boundaries. because then once you've established these, you know how to work with people. And okay, this got the best response. But Picard does it in a lot better way, because I can't remember the episode, but there is definitely one where Picard gets relieved of command for a little while and another captain comes on board. And he immediately, I want more duty rosters. I want more people doing this. I want that. He doesn't take the time to get to know the crew. He comes in and stamps his mark immediately, which is exactly to what you said about some people want to come in, stamp themselves straight away, and it just completely upends systems that maybe could do with a bit of a shake-up.
But for the most part, actually work well in the first place.
Yes, and you need to understand why
they happen and why they work like that. And that's what I really like about his listen, wait and see approach, really, because people show him what they're capable of.
And he realises that it's important to give people the chance to do that, because Will Riker doesn't come into the episode until much later on. But when he does come on, as you mentioned, he has him rejoin the saucer section of the ship with the main section, with the drive section.
No pressure there, given the fact it's fresh off the lot.
Yeah. If Riker puts a scratch in that, if he dings it, then, Picard is watching and noting it down.
Those insurance premiums are going up.
I think it wasn't just about establishing his kind of like, I'm the captain, you do as I say. Riker was a new officer on that ship as well. He didn't have much previous with anybody except maybe Councillor Troi, which we'll come on to in a bit. But so he's not just testing Riker to see where do you fit in my command structure. He's giving Riker that opportunity to show the rest of the crew, yes, I'm new to this, but I need your respect as well, and I'm perfectly capable of doing everything that I'm going to ask you to do. And that's something that Starfleet seems to do quite well, is they
leading by example.
Yes.
So from Riker's perspective, I think what you're saying there is he's establishing his authority and trust by showing that he can do the job. I mean, we've all been in jobs where somebody has come in to manage us and we're thinking, have you even ever done this before?
Did they get this fool from?
But to the most part, you do just need to trust that your leader has put them in there for a good reason. And the trouble is, when you're young, you don't always know why some of these people have been brought in. Actually, maybe they've got skills and experience that you don't actually know that they have. And it's not just a case of blindly trusting authority. It's a case of letting people get on with the job and earn your trust along the way.
So talking of pre-existing relationships among the crew and dealing with past expectations that they will already have of you, Picard does already have some relationships with some people on board, and I think the one that needs talking about the most right now is Dr. Crusher.
For sure. I mean, that is a big one with a lot of baggage coming in there.
There is a lot of past grief involved because Jean Luc was involved with the incident where Beverly became a widow, where she lost Jack, and she's so let's just look at things from her perspective for a second. She's the main medical officer on a ship where you are going to see some horrific medical things.
For sure.
She's working with a man who she has a complicated relationship with, who she might have a crush on, she might not. I don't think she's sure at this point, although it becomes obvious that she probably would if she could. She's also got her son on board. She's putting him in that position as well.
She's a single mother. She's got a big job with a lot of pressure. And with that, she's dealing with her grief, her loneliness, and also the pressure of the new job. And as we mentioned, her being a single mother. So then adding the additional pressure of the man who was responsible in some way, that might see it that way, for her husband's death, just adds that extra layer of complication to everything.
But to her credit, in the scene where Picard and Crusher meet see each other for the first time on board, he basically says, are you going to be all right with all the pre-existing baggage that we've got together? And she gives him a kind of like, you let me worry about myself, thank you.
That's my problem. You mind yourself. You mind your own business.
You get on with not scratching the ship. Whereas, I've got my own stuff to deal with. And
but he's right. Yeah. He's right to ask the question. question before they leave the dock to whether she can cope with it.
He is being a responsible boss and essentially saying, is your mental health going to be okay? It's great that he is taking the time out to check that.
He cares.
He does, and they are very lucky because they do have on board the position of the ship's counsellor.
They sure do. And that's something that we've not seen in any other starship or any of the other Star Trek series either, which is really interesting. You have to wonder, is this just a flagship benefit, or is this something that is just so a normal part of life in Starfleet that it doesn't really require much notice elsewhere?
I mean, you'd hope that for any deep exploration ship, you'd hope that there would be some form of counselling and mental wellness on board, because you are going to see some stuff. If you're going where no man has gone, boldly going where no man has gone before,
you're going to see some stuff.
You're going to come across some, and you're going to find yourself in some situations that you might have trouble processing afterwards.
Well,
and
you're going to do some stuff, and you're going to have some feelings about it afterwards.
Yeah, and who knows what you're going to have to do to get out of situations. But so the fact that they have that provision on board is something that I think is only just starting to become more prevalent in the real world today, is mental health provision in jobs. You know, speaking for the UK, we don't get a lot. We tend to be very reserved and stiff up a little. What? Keep calm and carry on.
It's very hard to speak.
It is. Whereas it's something that I think that America does incredibly
well
over us.
Yeah.
Is, you know, you won't find many people in Britain say I go to therapy, whereas in America, you know, it's you almost start every conversation with, well, this is my therapist. Who's your therapist?
This is what I say. This is what I say to them. I think we're getting it more and more often. I mean, I work for a company that does provide mental health support, and that is a really, really great benefit to have. We talk about it more and more, which is brilliant. But yeah, the Americans are so good at just making it a normal part of life for maintaining good, positive mental health and habits.
Yes. And I mean, for some people, therapy is the way to do it. Other people prefer talking therapies or drawing or different like that. Other people need to start a Star Trek-based YouTube show so that they can work out some issues. And
I mean, I was going to say, speak for yourself there.
So it's not just talking therapies that they have on board. The crew are actively encouraged to pursue leisure pursuits on the holodeck. There's so many musicians on board as well, and there are many different ways that you can help improve your mental health.
Exactly, and I think that the provision of this, not just on the flagship, but throughout all of the Star Trek ships that you see in this particular stage, they've got the provision of the holodeck. They expect you to exercise. They expect you to take part in activities. They provide 10 forward in the bar so that you can meet one another, you can socialize, you can meet people who you might not meet otherwise in the course of your work, and socialize and let off some steam. And I think that's really important. You know, no matter who you are or where you are, people engage with the captain, people can talk to one another. And I just think that that's a really wonderful, wonderful thing. It's all things that fill your emotional cup up. This job is hard. It's lonely. There's a lot of expectation, there is a lot of pressure, and you've got to be able to find some way, particularly when shore leave isn't going to happen for a long, long time, to keep yourself mentally and emotionally sharp.
Yeah, you are completely right. And just speaking to my own experiences a little bit, I used to work on a ship myself, not that kind of ship, unfortunately. I wish.
If only.
Yeah, but you're quite right about the provision of the bar being the decompression for people, because when I worked on the ships, at the end of every single day, you would find everybody in that crew bar, and you were completely right. You would have the guys in the engine room, you would have the navigators down there in their officer whites and everything, and it was a great mixing place for people to just decompress, talk about what you've been through that day, which was with us was sights. It was a cruise ship, so it was sightseeing, and which bit of the sea did you swim in today? Whereas it's, you know, whereas if you're on something like this and you're in 10 forward, you can have a lot more stuff. But sharing those stories and talking about things that you've experienced with people is such a vital way of helping keep on top of your mental health.
Definitely. I mean, building those relationships, keeping those relationships is so important, not just for the talking, but for bonding and feeling included as a part of the team, as a part of the crew as well. Huge and very important thing. And then, for me, it's very different. So some of the ways that I fill my cup is through solo endeavors, such as writing. So for me, these episodes, me working on some of the talking points for these is something that, helps me to fill my cup mentally and emotionally. Also, after a busy day at work, if I can go for a run, that really, really helps me burn off that excess energy and just empty my mind of the thoughts of the day. It just clears out the additional noise, the things that I could have done better, should have done better. I'm much less harder on myself when I have a chance to burn off that excess energy. And so they provide a lot of different ways that you can essentially fill your cup. You can go into the holodeck and get on a horse and live out a spaghetti western should you wish.
So it's a good job that people get chance to work on their mental health, because they live in a universe where there are...
They live in a universe where Q comes to test them.
Where all of a sudden you just get bing, and all of a sudden John Delancey appears next to you. Now, I know that there are certain parts of the fandom that do not have good things to say about Q. I love Q because I came to Star Trek as a child myself. And as a kid, I was there for space battles. I wasn't there for trade disputes. Really, I should have been watching maybe a different franchise that was around at the time. But whenever Q turned up, that was the Joker aspect. The trickster was there, and some random stuff was about to happen, and the effect that it had on the, most of the time they were, oh no, Q. There's like a brilliant scene where he turns up with the mariachi band, and Worf is just there going, "This guy."
That is an adult. That is someone who has got a job to do, has been thwarted, and is annoyed about it. And you have to admit, as a kid, that's funny. As an adult, that comes in and you're like, oh, no, it's not funny, Matt. Come on. I mean, I'll tell you what, it's a little bit like you got to go to work that day and it snows. And you're like, no, not snow. I have to drive in the snow. I'm not okay. I mean, I'm not okay with driving in the snow. I drove a rear-wheel drive car for years, and no, I do not wish to drive in snow, thank you very much. And I do not wish for Q to turn up at my work and test me.
In many aspects, Q is the unexpected blizzard that turns up, or the unexpected hurricane that wipes out people's families, even though it gets through the weather grid. Yes, I am going to keep making references to all the different things that Q does, but to bring him back to this episode, I mean, this was the episode where they hadn't quite defined what Q was yet. There's a lot of theories out there. Was Q always one entity being a Joker all the way through, or were the different... You can watch this first episode and think of the different Qs that turn up as different aspects of the Q continuum. They hadn't quite worked it out, but the main point for Q in this one is to get Picard and the human race on trial, because the main point of this episode, in my opinion, was that they needed to establish Picard's captain credibility, but also the talking about your problems rather than fighting is how we're going to solve a lot of things in this universe. And Q putting the human race on trial gives Picard a chance to show and demonstrate these leadership aspects himself. The first thing he tries to do, move away, run away. Okay, I can't do that. Let's move all the civilians out of harm's way. And then when Q goes, I'm not giving you a choice, he goes, right, I have no choice but to accept this predicament. So he immediately puts on the best defense that he can.
So for Picard, it's very much about staying calm in the face of changing and adapting challenges. He's got to try his one thing first. He tries the next thing. He tries the next thing. And when it comes to the point where he realizes that he has to face it head on, he does. But one of the things that I really want to cover within this as well is the establishing of Starfleet's values and how he continues to live Starfleet's values even when they're not watching him. He's put on trial. He could do anything. He could say anything. He could try and wipe out the whole lot of them, and Starfleet would probably never know, but he does not do that. He stays and he shows who he is and he shows who Starfleet is. And I think that's a really important thing. So Matt, in the face of these challenges, and obviously we've been talking about the positive mental health things to be doing throughout there, it's really important to regulate your emotions during those challenges. So I was just wondering, how do you think the frustration of dealing with what Q had to offer, or the frustration of being asked to park a spaceship manually, how do you think that ties into this episode and what we want to learn from it?
Well, everybody can get frustrated with things that you're asked, especially if it's from a new commander or an omnipotent space wizard god.
And you don't understand why.
Yes, and you've got no idea why. And what I'm trying to take from this and learn and incorporate myself is staying calm in those situations and trying to put trying not to basically get to anger. There are so many points throughout this episode where somebody could have turned around and gone, yeah, but why? And kicked up a fuss and demanded thorough explanations for everything because everybody wants to know the ins and outs of everything all the time. Whereas sometimes
the why isn't important.
It's not. It's about dealing with the situation as it comes up. It doesn't matter how we've got to this point. It doesn't matter whose fault it is that we're here. It doesn't matter why you're asking me to park that spaceship, why you're asking me to justify my existence or any of this. You are in that situation, so screaming and shouting about the journey up to it, pointless.
Yeah.
Deal with it as you can, and then learn from it afterwards.
Yeah.
Deal with the repercussions as they come up. But the self-reflection that I think a lot of the characters in Star Trek are encouraged to do is a really good way of how can we learn from this day? How can we learn from this experience? And one thing that I love about Star Trek is that you see the characters learn throughout the episodes.
Yeah.
If a character learns a lesson, it continues forward. We'll skip forward a little bit here, but the example that I've been using for this is Worf. Worf learns a lot of fathership skills in a couple of episodes, and then several series later, they pay off. And those lessons that he learned of how to deal with Alexander are beneficial to another culture and another people. So I think that moment of self-reflection and just seeing how you can deal with things a little bit better and just be
adapt,
more Picard.
change, and grow. And you see that in Worf's journey between Next Generation into DS9
Yep.
and also Picard as
Yep.
well.
Yes,
lessons that he takes through 3 different series.
I've always enjoyed Worf, but when he turned up in series 3 of Picard, it just went, I'm a pacifist now. I was like, yes, of course you are. And you spent the entire series going like, yeah, but you're not. I mean, you are. All right, you are, but come on.
Sure.
Come on. A pacifist don't carry a massive, great big sword like that for no reason, mate, do they?
No, but I mean... That's fine.
Let's start to bring this to a close now, because I think we've started to get a good flavour here of what we're trying to do on this channel, of to analyse what we can from Star Trek without going too deep into the story and the why Gene Roddenberry did what he did, perhaps in this first
I
go.
think a lot of people already know and understand the original principles that Gene Roddenberry wanted to bring to the series.
I don't see as there's going to be many people. I mean, hopefully there are people watching this who haven't got much experience with Star Trek before. If you've come to this from a mental health perspective, if you're looking for ways that you can, do things that, or just self-improvement as well. We don't want it to be that this is purely mental health. This is self-improvement in every aspect of our lives is what we think we can do with certain episodes of The Next Generation. But yes, the chances are that most people watching this will probably have a basic working understanding of.
We're expecting that. I mean, if you're here, you're probably a fan, right?
Yeah. So we don't want to keep treading old ground that has been trod a lot of times before.
No.
So let's start to summarise what we've learned from this episode and what we can kind of take forward and what we want to concentrate on and what this has made us think about ourselves.
Sure. I mean, so from me, it's about when you start a new situation, about opening your ears, listening before you talk. Star Trek is a great example of how to behave at work. I mean, when you watch it compared to, say, other series, I mean... I love Scrubs, but you do not watch that show as an example or role model of how to behave at work, right? And one of the things that struck me about Star Trek and watching it is not just about how to behave at work, about being calm, about listening, about taking instruction, taking things on board, how to disagree with one another respectfully, how to successfully collaborate to come to the best example. That's a lot of the stuff that I got from watching Star Trek and about how to behave at work. But it's a lot about making that first impression, and I think that episode shows a really good example of it. Making that first impression, making a good first impression, but also adaptability in the face of change and challenge.
I would totally agree with all of that. It's something that I will try and emulate myself, is to not argue with people, but to give them that space that, okay, let's prove ourselves, find a better way of proving myself and letting other people prove themselves, and finding how we can all kind of mesh together so that we can understand and trust one another and work with our own abilities and our own strengths and find out what we are. Trust each other, even in the face of now and again people do slip. The first time that Troi finds out that Riker's on board, she essentially does the telepath version of, "Hey boy, hey, remember me, Anzadi? Hey, remember that name that I only call you at special times." And there's a time and a place for, everybody is text their ex. Maybe don't do it in a turbo lift in front of the captain, because the whole time Riker is stood there just going like, "He's right there." You're like, "Come on, I can't stop you because you're a telepath," when the story needs it. So, but,
where's the trust there, Matt?
Yeah, where is the trust there? She's just basically going, "Hey boy," and he's like, in a bit, time and a place.
And it just shows that neither of them, and no one in this show, is perfect either. They make mistakes, they slip up, they do things which is probably not ideal. I mean, you shouldn't be going "you up" to your ex in front of his new boss. So in a sense, she broke
it at all, really.
She shouldn't. Oh, Matt. It's a starship. They're locked on it with another. People.
Once you've been through all the holodeck programs several times and you've talked to everybody in 10 Forward, hey, you, yeah. I mean, Tasha Yar and Data in a couple of episodes' time, and the relationships are something that we will cover. But to your point, it is important to say that we don't think that these characters are paragons of virtue and that you should emulate everything that they do. Something that I love about it is that everybody is flawed. Throughout these, you do see aspects of ourselves within them, and our own frustrations that can come out. And even in the 23rd, 24th century, when we don't have to worry about money anymore, when everybody lives in a tolerant society where everybody is welcome, it's still the little things that can get you down. But that is the whole point of what we are trying to do with this show, is to find the examples of those characters bettering themselves, improving themselves, and just leading better lives, and how we can apply that to today. So I think for now it's probably best that we start to wrap this up. And we've had a good time making this, and hopefully you guys, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for getting so far through the video. We do appreciate everybody who gets here. This has been a bit of a feeling out session for us, just to kind of see how it goes and what we're going to do in the future. So if you've got any comments, notes for us about this, we would love to hear from you down in the comments, and especially if you've got stories about how Star Trek has helped you and helped you improve your life. But I think for now it's probably best that we start to wrap things up and just say that there are many opportunities to come at so many situations in life and different ways that we can approach them. But if you get a chance in any situation to be more Picard, make it so.